The night of silence and the shattered town. Welcome to Ghost Vibes. On November 13, 2022, in the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho, a chilling act of violence took place that defied all logic and shattered the community's sense of safety. 4 University of Idaho students, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in their off-campus home in the dead of night. This was not a robbery gone wrong or a typical domestic dispute. The victims were attacked while they slept, and the brutality of the scene suggested a highly personal, targeted rage. The initial shock was compounded by a bizarre layer of silence. The attack happened in a home shared by 6 people, yet the 2 surviving roommates were unharmed, seemingly unaware of the massacre until hours later. The immediate investigation was marked by confusion and local panic. Moscow, Idaho, a town that hadn't seen a murder in 7 years, was suddenly the center of an international media storm. The police initially struggled to find clues, which led to agonizing weeks of public misinformation and fear. There was no forced entry, no clear motive, and the murder weapon, a large knife, was missing. The silence from law enforcement, largely due to the highly sensitive nature of the ongoing investigation, fueled frantic speculation online. The case became a phenomenon on social media, with millions of armchair detectives trying to piece together the evidence based on scant police updates and leaked details. But the police were not inactive. Behind the scenes, they were building a massive, intricate case. They focused on a single, tiny piece of forensic evidence left at the scene, along with the vague descriptions provided by the surviving roommates, who recalled hearing noises and seeing an unfamiliar person leave the house. The case of the Idaho murders was quickly moving from a local tragedy to a sophisticated digital manhunt, utilizing tools the killer never suspected. The key to solving this case wouldn't be found on the streets of Moscow, but in the digital trails left by the killer and, most importantly, on the blade of a knife and the silence of the night. The digital footprint, the white Elantra, and the cell tower data. The investigation into the Idaho student murders quickly moved beyond traditional police work, becoming a race against time fought in the digital sphere. Since physical evidence was scarce, police zeroed in on 2 critical non-traditional clues: a mysterious vehicle and the killer's hidden digital footprint. The first major break came from surveillance footage collected from homes and businesses surrounding the student neighborhood. Hours of video footage, often grainy and low resolution, were meticulously analyzed. This effort revealed a distinct pattern. A white Hyundai Elantra was observed circling the residence multiple times in the hours leading up to the attack, and again rapidly fleeing the scene shortly after the time the murders were believed to have occurred. This vehicle became the primary focus of the manhunt. Police issued a public alert for the vehicle, transforming the hunt into a national effort. However, the most explosive evidence was being collected silently through court-ordered warrants. Cell tower data. Investigators obtained a geofence warrant, which allowed them to identify all cell phones that were in the immediate vicinity of the house in the hours before and after the murders. They then cross-referenced this data with records showing which phones had been turned off or placed in airplane mode near the crime scene, a common tactic used by calculated criminals trying to avoid detection. The cell tower analysis revealed an individual who demonstrated extremely suspicious behavior. Not only was this individual's phone turned off during the time of the murders, but the data showed that this same phone had been active in the area of the victim's residence on at least 12 prior occasions in the months leading up to the attack. This suggested that the killer had not chosen the target randomly. He had been stalking the house and the victims for an extended period, learning their routines and patterns. The confluence of the digital stalking pattern and the identifiable white Elantra allowed law enforcement to narrow their focus dramatically. The digital silence surrounding the time of the murder was, ironically, the loudest clue that exposed the killer's calculated approach. The question now was, who owned a white Hyundai Elantra, and whose phone had a history of digital surveillance near the student's house? The suspect profile, the criminology student. The digital evidence pointing to the white Hyundai Elantra and the highly unusual pattern of prior phone activity led investigators down a highly specific and disturbing path. They began matching vehicle registration records and cell phone owners to the identified digital footprint, which quickly led them to a shocking suspect, Bryan Kohberger. Kohberger was a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University, WSU, in Pullman, Washington, a university campus located just a short 15-minute drive across the state line from Moscow, Idaho. This proximity immediately raised alarms. The suspect's academic background added a deeply unsettling layer to the case. A doctoral student studying the psychology of criminals, their motives, and law enforcement investigative techniques would possess the theoretical knowledge to attempt the perfect crime and evade capture. This suggested that the killer viewed the murder not just as an act of violence, but as a criminological experiment, or a challenge to the system he was studying. Police discovered that Kohberger owned a white Hyundai Elantra, matching the exact description provided by the surveillance footage. Furthermore, his cell phone activity placed him not only near the victim's house on the night of the murders, but also, critically, traced his route on his flight from the scene, back across the border to Pullman immediately after the attack. The final piece of the digital puzzle came from a detailed analysis of the suspect's movements in the days following the murder. Cell tower data showed that Kohberger deliberately returned to the immediate vicinity of the crime scene hours after the murders, suggesting a narcissistic or compulsive return to view the consequences of his actions or to check for any missed evidence. A behavior pattern common among serial offenders, the profile now was terrifyingly complete. A man with a professional understanding of crime, who had stalked his victims digitally for months, executed a brutal attack, and then returned to the scene. The police now had a name, a vehicle, and a sophisticated pattern of behavior, but they still needed irrefutable physical evidence to connect him directly to the horrific act inside the house, the surviving witness and the ghost in the hallway. While digital evidence formed the foundation of the case against Bryan Kohberger, the most terrifying and human piece of the puzzle came from the victim's own house. The account of one of the surviving roommates, DM. In the affidavit later released by police, DM provided a chilling, fragmented timeline of the early morning hours of November 13th, a timeline that placed her in close proximity to the killer. DM recounted being awake around 4 a.m., hearing a sound she initially dismissed as one of the roommates playing with their dog. She heard voices and what she believed was crying coming from one of the upstairs bedrooms. The sequence of sounds suggested a struggle, but DM, fearing conflict or simply processing the events slowly, initially remained in her room. The most critical moment occurred shortly after. DM opened her bedroom door and saw a tall, masked male figure walking toward her, passing directly by her door. She described the man as having bushy eyebrows and wearing a mask that covered his mouth and nose and dark clothing. Crucially, the man was walking toward the backsliding door, away from the bedrooms where the attacks occurred. This visual confirmation was essential. It provided a key physical description of the assailant and directly placed an unknown male inside the house at the exact time of the murders. Overwhelmed with fear, DM quickly retreated into her room and locked the door. She remained in silence, paralyzed by terror, until several hours later when the attack was finally discovered. The fact that the killer passed directly by a surviving roommate, who was able to provide a partial description, and that he apparently did not notice her or simply ignored her, added a terrifying dimension to his focus and singular purpose. This witness account, though delayed, corroborated the investigators' timeline and helped establish the modus operandi (MO) of the attack. A quick surgical assault aimed solely at the 4 victims, before a rapid exit. DM's chilling description of the ghost in the hallway, the quiet figure moving through the house, became the human link required to connect the overwhelming digital and vehicle evidence to the terrifying events inside the home. The final forensic link, the sheath and the DNA. Despite the compelling digital evidence and the surviving roommate's account, police needed irrefutable physical proof to secure an arrest warrant for a murder of this magnitude. That proof was finally found, not through advanced tech, but through a basic error made by the methodical killer himself. At the crime scene, nestled near one of the deceased victims, investigators located a knife sheath. This sheath was identified as being a specific type, often sold with combat-style knives. The killer, in his rush to flee, had left the most damning piece of physical evidence behind. Forensic analysis of the sheath was conducted immediately, and with the highest level of scrutiny. The analysis yielded a single crucial finding, a trace amount of male DNA on the button snap of the sheath. This DNA profile was uploaded to forensic databases but yielded no immediate match, as the individual was not in the CODIS system. This is where the digital and forensic investigations converged. Knowing the suspect was Bryan Kohberger, police needed a way to link the DNA on the sheath to him, without alerting him to the investigation. The opportunity arose when Kohberger and his father drove cross-country from Washington back to their family home in Pennsylvania for the holiday break. Authorities obtained warrants and began meticulous surveillance on the Kohberger residence. The police employed a brilliant piece of investigative timing. They covertly retrieved trash from the family's garbage outside their home in Pennsylvania. Forensic scientists analyzed the discarded items and successfully obtained a DNA sample from the trash. The resulting analysis confirmed a familial link. The trash DNA was a strong match to the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath. This provided the genetic probability needed to secure an immediate, high-priority arrest warrant. On December 30th, 2022, Bryan Kohberger, the criminology PhD student, was arrested at his family home in Pennsylvania. The police now had the critical link. The man with the suspicious digital footprint and the white Elantra was genetically connected to the DNA on the sheath left beside one of the victims. The perfect crime had failed due to a single tiny, forgotten piece of material: the arrest and the cross-country pursuit. The arrest of Bryan Kohberger in December 2022 was an event marked by meticulous planning and high drama, concluding a 6-week, nation-spanning manhunt. Following the DNA familial match secured from the Pennsylvania trash sample, law enforcement agencies rapidly mobilized. The arrest took place at the Kohberger family home in Chestnut Hill Township, Pennsylvania, where the suspect had been spending the holiday break. The SWAT team, acting under a warrant, moved swiftly and silently, catching Kohberger entirely by surprise. He was taken into custody without resistance, maintaining the calm and controlled demeanor he had exhibited throughout the investigation. During the days leading up to the arrest, the FBI and local police had maintained constant, covert surveillance on Kohberger during his cross-country drive from Washington state to Pennsylvania. This surveillance revealed a highly suspicious detail. According to reports, during the 2,500-mile journey, Kohberger had allegedly taken great care to clean his vehicle, including the interior and exterior, potentially attempting to remove forensic evidence related to the crimes. Following the arrest, authorities immediately seized the white Hyundai Elantra from the family's property. The vehicle was transported back to Idaho for detailed forensic processing, where investigators hoped to find further traces of the victim's DNA or the murder weapon itself. The vehicle, which had been the killer's silent accomplice, was now a crucial piece of the prosecution's evidence. Kohberger's legal defense immediately began to form, focusing on the circumstantial nature of the digital evidence. While the cell phone pings and the vehicle sighting placed him in the area, the prosecution's case initially relied heavily on the single trace DNA sample from the sheath. The defense would later argue that the cell phone data could be misinterpreted and that the familial DNA match was not direct proof of his presence at the time of the stabbing. The initial extradition process back to Idaho was tense, with Kohberger ultimately waiving his right to a prolonged legal battle in Pennsylvania. The focus shifted entirely to the Moscow courthouse, where the complex legal proceedings against the criminology student, accused of one of the nation's most shocking mass murders, were set to begin. The probable cause affidavit and the chilling details. Upon Bryan Kohberger's return to Idaho, the public finally received the first substantial glimpse into the evidence against him with the release of the probable cause affidavit, PCA. This document, released by police to justify the charges, offered the most chilling and detailed account yet of the investigation and the sequence of events inside the house. The PCA confirmed the terrifying convergence of evidence. 1. Digital stalking. The affidavit detailed the 12 prior instances where Kohberger's phone had been in the vicinity of the victim's residence, establishing a clear pattern of premeditation and targeting. 2. The timeline. It precisely established the timeline of the white Elantra circling the house and fleeing the scene immediately after the attacks. 3. The witness account. It included the full, explicit account of the surviving roommate, DM, who saw the masked man with bushy eyebrows walking past her door towards the exit. This testimony was crucial, as it was the only visual identification of an intruder inside the house. Here, the DNA link. The affidavit formally confirmed that the single male DNA profile found on the button snap of the knife sheath was linked to the familial DNA obtained from Kohberger's trash in Pennsylvania. Beyond the formal evidence, the PCA revealed a terrifying sequence of movements inside the house. It suggested that the killer accessed the house through a sliding door, carried out the attacks in the 2 upstairs bedrooms, and then left the sheath accidentally near one of the victims' bodies before exiting the same way. The meticulous planning of the approach was undone by the carelessness of the retreat. The affidavit did not provide a motive, nor did it contain the smoking gun, the confession, or the recovery of the murder weapon, but it presented a strong, intricate, circumstantial web of digital, testimonial, and forensic evidence. For the first time, the public could see the face of the alleged killer and the precise, terrifying methods used by law enforcement to hunt the silent phantom who had shattered the peace of a small college town. The defense strategy and the alibi disclosure. The transition from the initial affidavit release to the legal battle was immediate and intense. Bryan Kohberger pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his defense team began the complex process of challenging the state's seemingly airtight case. The defense strategy centered on dismantling the circumstantial nature of the prosecution's evidence, particularly the cell phone data and the DNA trace. Their arguments primarily focused on 2 areas. 1. Challenging the digital data. The defense argued that cell phone tower pings only provide a general location and cannot definitively place Kohberger inside the house. They also questioned the reliance on the 12 prior instances of digital stalking, suggesting that as a PhD student in criminology who lived only minutes away, his presence in the area could have entirely innocent academic explanations, e.g., fieldwork, research, or simply driving through. 2. Questioning the DNA. While admitting a genetic link, the defense team heavily emphasized that the DNA was only a trace amount found on the snap of the sheath, not the weapon itself. They would argue that this trace element could have been transferred, secondary transfer, onto the sheath days or weeks before the crime, or that its presence at the scene did not prove Kohberger was the one who wielded the knife. The most crucial element of the defense's counterattack came later, with the legally required alibi disclosure. Kohberger's lawyers stated that the suspect was driving alone in the early morning hours of the murders. While this initial statement was vague, they later specified that Kohberger was driving away from the Moscow area, a statement that directly contradicts the prosecution's evidence placing his vehicle and phone near the house at the time of the killings. This alibi, that he was simply driving alone late at night, a habit he claimed to have, attempted to neutralize the prosecution's timeline. The defense's goal was not necessarily to prove his innocence outright, but to introduce enough reasonable doubt regarding the digital evidence and the interpretation of the trace DNA that the high bar for conviction would not be met. The battle for the truth was now shifting from the police lab to the courtroom, where every piece of evidence would be subjected to intense adversarial scrutiny. The pretrial battle, gag orders, and media circus. The legal proceedings against Bryan Kohberger transcended a typical murder case, becoming an unprecedented pretrial spectacle fueled by intense public demand for information. This resulted in a series of highly restrictive judicial measures designed to protect the integrity of the future trial. The most significant legal measure was the implementation of a strict gag order by the presiding judge. This order severely limited what police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and even the victims' families could publicly discuss regarding the evidence, the suspect's background, and the ongoing investigation. The gag order was deemed necessary because the extreme media saturation and social media speculation risked polluting the potential jury pool, making it impossible to find 12 impartial jurors. However, the gag order itself became a source of controversy. While it silenced the official sources, it failed to stop the torrent of online rumors and unofficial leaks that continued to circulate on platforms like Reddit and TikTok, where the case first gained viral traction. The public's desire for every detail of the case clashed directly with the legal system's need for a fair process. The defense capitalized on the atmosphere, filing numerous motions aimed at suppressing key evidence, particularly the cell phone data and the methodology used to collect the DNA sample from the trash. They argued that the warrants used to obtain this information were overly broad or violated Kohberger's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure. The rulings on these motions, which often came months apart, were closely watched, as they determined which pieces of evidence would ultimately be admissible to the jury. Furthermore, the defense sought a change of venue, arguing that the pervasive, emotionally charged media coverage in the Moscow region had made a fair trial impossible in Lada County. The pre-trial phase was thus defined by this legal push and pull, the prosecution fighting to keep every piece of damning evidence in play, and the defense attempting to shrink the mountain of evidence down to a few debatable fragments. The battle was fought not just over facts, but over the very perception of justice in the digital age, the lasting impact and the future of forensic science. The case of the Idaho student murders and the subsequent prosecution of Bryan Kohberger stands as a landmark example of modern forensic investigations. Regardless of the trial's final verdict, the case has already cast a long shadow over both law enforcement tactics and the study of criminology. Firstly, the investigation highlighted the profound power and pitfalls of digital forensics. The reliance on cell phone data, geofencing, and vehicle surveillance proved instrumental in identifying a suspect who left almost no traditional evidence. This reliance, however, also opened new avenues for defense challenges regarding privacy and search procedures, setting precedents for how digital trails are tracked and utilized in courtrooms worldwide. Secondly, the case exposed the terrifying reality of forensic genetic genealogy, FGG, in high-profile cases. While FGG was used to confirm the familial link, the eventual goal is to connect the DNA on the knife sheath directly to Kohberger. The prosecution's success in obtaining a direct DNA swab from the suspect post-arrest cemented the physical connection, transforming the trace evidence into a central pillar of the case. The use of DNA to solve cold cases is common, but here it was the key to solving a case that was rapidly going cold. Finally, the unique profile of the alleged killer, a PhD student in criminology, forced the public and experts alike to confront the idea of a highly intelligent, narcissistic killer attempting to outsmart the very system he was studying. This adds a psychological depth to the case. The suspect wasn't driven by impulse, but by a calculated, cold, intellectual curiosity, turning human life into case study data. The legal process is ongoing, demanding patience and adherence to the rule of law. The tragedy of the 4 young lives lost remains the heart of the story, serving as a solemn reminder of the fragility of safety. The legacy of the Idaho murders will forever be linked to the technological tools that tracked the killer's movements in the digital night, and the meticulous police work that exposed the terrifying contradiction between academic knowledge and criminal depravity.